Today's video is a compilation of every Malicious Compliance Reddit story that I've read to date. I've put each story's timestamp in the description below, but I encourage you to just let this play in the background as you chill out and go about your day. With that being said, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Make up a BS lunchtime policy to appease the office drama queen? Sure, I'll follow it to the letter. Posted by Cathjoy. Many years ago, I worked in the back office support in a large office with lots of departments. Generally speaking, we had core hours, especially for lunch. Core lunch hours were between 12 and 2, meaning you had to take your lunch sometime between 12 and 2. Different departments had different rules for lunch depending on their needs. For example, the call center had a strict rota for when people could take their lunch since they needed constant phone cover. However, I was in back office support. Things were a lot more relaxed because we rarely took phone calls. Most of our work came in the form of tickets and tasks logged through our system and emails from other departments with general queries. The only requirement was that at least one manager and 2 members of staff had to be there at all times in case a colleague from another department needed to see us or, in an emergency, call us. So generally, we could take our lunch anytime we wanted as long as it was between 12 and 2. There was no policy telling us when to take our lunch aside from the one I already mentioned. I would always take my lunch at 12:28. The reason was I actually wanted to take it at 12:30, but one of our call centers was the floor above us and they stampeded down the stairs at 12:30. I had been in an accident some years ago that gave me issues with my back and hips, so I could be a little unsteady on the stairs, so I left at 12:28 so I could avoid the call center stampede. I suppose I could have gone at 12, but the staff canteen was never set up, and I never had food ready at 12, that's why I left at 12:28. Now, I always restarted work exactly 1:28, sometimes a few minutes earlier. An hour was far too long for me, so I was often back at my desk nursing a coffee while scrolling through my phone, which we were allowed to do as long as we were on break, by around 1 p.m. as well. However, if a colleague came to me and asked for help, I always helped and just added the time I was helping them to my lunch. So if I spent 10 minutes helping a colleague, I'd come back at 1:38. All of this would be logged in our timesheet, and I wasn't doing anything outside of policy. We were allowed to do this. Anyway, one of my colleagues had obviously noticed. Let's call her Mindy. Mindy considered herself the queen bee of the office. Everything had to be done her way. She was perfect, and she always tattled on people for petty stuff. Like that one of our colleagues used too many staples, or that colleagues were literally a few minutes late, or took too many pee breaks. She literally had a tally of how many drinks and pee breaks everyone took so that she could tattle. She even once tried to tattle and say one of my colleagues came in drunk and she could smell it on her breath. What she could smell was Limsip and cold meds. The colleague she was tattling on had a cold. Unfortunately, Mindy was also our manager's favorite employee, so she got away with a lot. So she tattles to our manager about how I'm always leaving for lunch 2 minutes early and yet often come back late. My manager tears me a new one for this. I explained to him that the times I come back late are when I've helped a colleague and he should see it logged on the sheet. I also explain why I leave at 12:28. He then says, yes, well, whether it's 2 minutes or not, we have core hours in this office. I say, yeah, 12 to 2. I can take my lunch anytime between 12 and 2. 12:28 is within those core hours, so then he tried to say no. In our department, we have a policy of 12:30 to 1:30 to make sure enough people are in the department. I say, I've never heard of this policy, this has never been the case. But he brushes me off and says, you take your lunch at 12:30 and come back at 1:30. You don't deal with any queries or anything that will delay you. Just take your lunch on time and come back on time. No exceptions. Okay then, that's exactly what I'll do. No matter what I'm doing, even if I'm in the middle of a task, I get up and go to lunch. Even if I'm at my desk and a colleague comes to me, I tell them I'm on lunch and to come back later. Then, surprise, surprise, Mindy comes along with an urgent query at 1:10. I look her dead in the eye and say, sorry, I'm on lunch. She storms off to our manager to tattle on me. I get called into his office because she lodged a complaint against me for bullying her and being uncooperative. Mindy is in the office with my manager acting as a mediator. He asks why I refuse to help her. She's grinning maliciously with her trademark, you're going to get it face. She spoke to me at 1:10. I had 20 minutes left of lunch. You said the policy is lunch, 12:30 to 1:30, no exceptions, I said, smiling. Mindy looked like she wanted to slap me, and my manager was furious, but he knew he couldn't do or say anything because that was what he said. Eventually, the manager ended up being promoted and moved to another department. Our new manager had no patience for Mindy's excessive tattling and at one point shouted at her, "This isn't primary school and I'm not your teacher. Go back to your desk and focus on your own work instead of everyone else." The new manager also rescinded the no exceptions BS policy that my manager had made on the spot, and as long as we came back on time and didn't leave the department understaffed, she couldn't care less when we took our lunch. Whoa, now that is truly taking it by the book and just delivering on what you know is right. Well done. "Sorry, ma'am. Of course your son can try the 7 million Scoville heat units hot sauce," posted by A. Ray Vin. "I work in a hot sauce store in a busy outlet mall. We're a well-liked, locally owned business and have many loyal return customers. But at this particular location, we also get a lot of tourists who are curious about our challenge items, or Hot Ones products. We have a large variety of samples available every day. Literally like 100 hot sauces and 50 plus barbecue wing sauces just out on the table. We can pull another 50 plus bottles or so from the fridge if one's open. Every so often we get people who come into the store and ask to try the hottest sauce. They love jalapenos in their burritos, and they've eaten habaneros straight, and they're ready to enter the ring, swallow some sauce, and gain the admiration of a couple friends and bystanders at the cost of a stomach ache. We usually try to guide them to the 10th hottest sauce in the store, burn them with it, and move on to something mild or medium suited to their taste. Today, while I was selling items to people who were actually paying for things, a 10 or so year old boy enters the store. I always get wary when children enter the store alone because it's full of glass bottles. They usually dart straight for the shelves and pick something up, but this child came barreling towards me like a bullet. While I make change for the couple buying some sauce, he calls out to me, "Excuse me," in a horrendous, whiny pitch. I ignore the rude interruption and continue my conversation with my customers. He parrots it again 12 times or so back to back as I thank these people and get them out of the store. Finally, I turn to him. "How can I help you?" Where the heck are these kids' parents?
"Hi, can I try the hottest sauce in the store?"
Not this crap again. I'm not dealing with this, not with a 10-year-old kid. I explained to him that the hottest sauce on the table is Hellboy, Right Hand of Doom. It's spiked with a 6.66 million Scoville extract, and honestly, if you're not experienced with this kind of stuff more than just a tiny bit, it can really mess up a good part of your day. Take my word for it. I explained to him that he has to be 19 years old to try it and sign a waiver, which is BS, but I'm off in 30 minutes, so screw this kid, and instead guide him to a tasty fermented habanero that he coughs his eyes out on before explaining to me that he could handle the right hand of doom because his dad eats spicy peppers with him all the time. "Okay," I say. Oh, he leaves, thank God. 15 minutes later, I'm interrupted by another customer, this time a gigantic woman in a blue blouse. She's set next to my sample table like a giant blueberry, blocking up 20% of my floor space. "Excuse me," apple doesn't fall far. The customers I'm with are polite and excuse me to speak to her. "You didn't let my son try the sauce." I explained to her that it has extract in it several hundred times hotter than anything he has ever eaten, and that it can cause him severe discomfort, and that I will not let him try it in my store. I explain that she is free to purchase the sauce and have him try it at home if she so wishes. She explains to me that she married a Mexican man and that I wouldn't believe the things we ate in New Mexico City, where he grew up. When I asked what they had eaten there, she told me, "Things hotter than anything we have in the store." At this point, her daughter interrupts our conversation. I kid you not. "Excuse me?" "What?" Now I'm getting annoyed. I was annoyed from the second I saw the kid, and now he's back 20 minutes later with all three of them. "Why do you sell Valentina? It's not even a hot sauce." Jeez. Aren't you from Mexico? It says salsa picante on the bottle. It's $5.50. I'm off at 6. I've had enough. "How about this? You can try the sauce, and if it's as mild as you think, I'll let him try it." She agreed and grabbed her sample stick. I reached for the right hand of doom and unscrewed the cap. Its nuclear aroma sending memories of aches to my stomach. As she goes to dip the stick into the sauce, I warn her to only take a small amount. She grins at me and dips the stick all the way into the sauce. Trap card. She slaps it in her mouth. Immediately, she looks uneasy before she throws herself into pure agony. She is coughing and swinging her head back and forth, trying desperately to speak, but she cannot muster any words. She dropped her sample stick in all the chaos. After a few solid minutes of coughing and dry heaving, she manages a single word. I explained to her that water won't help her now. My relief walks through the door just in time to witness the finish. She tells me that the only reason she's coughing is because it went down the wrong pipe. She then immediately vomits into our garbage can. She apologizes for spitting up, like she didn't just rocket launch half a liter of chum into my trash can, and then leaves without saying anything else. I tossed out the trash with a smile on my face and clocked out. Wow. Yeah, that's all you really got to say about that one is it's very epic revenge. Malicious compliance, he just stuck to the plan. That's what they said they wanted to do, so he did it. Very nicely delivered, sir. Security made us show the last 5 photos on our phone, posted by Stuff Things and Stuff. My coworker and an absolute hero maliciously complied at security on one of our subcontractor jobs. The customer was a manufacturer for high-end electronic components. Security was tight as a small 4 by 6 inch box could contain $250,000 worth of microchips. Our team was installing equipment in their facility for 1 week. A security checkpoint had to be passed every trip in or out of the building. Mr. Security Guard, Chad maybe, decided my coworker, Steve probably, was more suspicious than the other 4 techs. So every trip in or out, not only was Steve made to dump his entire contents of his backpack out on the table and go through it, Chad required Steve to show him the last 5 pictures taken on his phone to prove he wasn't stealing secrets. This is all fine, except Chad lets everyone else through without any sort of inspection. Steve is trying to stay positive, but obviously this is eating away at him. Steve tries to be overly positive and also a bit snarky with comments like, "Thank you, Paul Blart, for keeping America safe," which bust up the rest of our crew. Then Steve has the idea that will free him the rest of the week. Wednesday comes along, and Steve is overly scrutinized on our way in as usual. As we head back to security at lunch, Steve says he has to go to the bathroom. He comes back out a few minutes later, absolutely giddy. Chad Blart, mall cop, stops us on our way out and asks Steve to see his camera roll. Steve gladly hands the phone over, and Chad is greeted by some very peculiarly angled shots of Steve's butthole. What the? Chad throws the phone down on the table. "Oh, sorry, I had a hemorrhoid and I wanted to see how bad it was. Is everything okay with my pictures? Is the facility safe?" Chad never checks Steve's materials again. Good on you, Steve. "Nah, we don't need a professional to fell these trees." Okay. Posted by Independent Okra 8577. This is a story of how my dad, with my consent but against my advice, accidentally weaponized a tree. I live in the capital of a Central European country and recently visited my parents at the countryside. They needed me to help to deal with some trees that they wanted to fell. I assumed they wanted to finally make short work of the semi-healthy trees along the driveway that kept branching in the way. But no, they decided that the row of beeches at the southeastern corner of the property had to go. You should know 3 things here. 1, those trees are really, really tall, like 15 meters, which is about 50 feet, and rather thin. 2, there's an equally high barn just a few meters behind those trees on the neighbor's property to the south. It's pretty old, but it's been renovated time and time again to serve as a storage and party location. 3, in front of the trees are compost containers, a crooked walnut tree, and bushes that my mother planted, creating a corridor of only around 7 meters, or 23 feet, for the trees to land in without breaking anything. Also important, my sister, also living in a bigger city and not present when these events took place, and I are actually the co-owners of the house and the property as my father transferred ownership to us some years ago. While so far those beaches had survived their fair share of storms, they'd probably become a problem as they kept growing. And since new neighbors on the property bordering on the eastern side are in the process of building a house, they'd be their problem as well. So I agreed they had to go. However, my parents wanted to fell them by themselves, meaning my dad would be the one to operate the chainsaw on them. He worked as a technician before retiring, always did a lot of repair and building work in and around the house, but he's past 70 and has adopted a rather unhealthy lifestyle after leaving the workforce, and his eyesight and motor skills, while still perfectly suited for most kinds of technical operations, have deteriorated a bit. Knowing this, I objected and suggested hiring a professional to do the job and sharing the cost. I argued that any damage, beechwood is pretty heavy, or injury that might occur if these things went sideways wouldn't be covered by insurance and thus come in quite costly. Also, doing this without even as much as notifying the local authorities might be illegal. Okay, it's the countryside. If any regulations of such kind even exist, folks here like to interpret them as friendly advice rather than actual law, but I digress. My parents wouldn't have any of it and even refused to get an estimate from a professional. I did some basic research and found out that the cost would probably come in at around 500 to 1,000 euro, which is $600 to $1,200. Not a small sum, but the forester or lumberjack who'd take up the work would be responsible for any damage. No dice, even after trying to bring my points across several times. "Oh no, we don't need a professional. Why should we waste money when we can do it by ourselves?" they said. "It'll be fine," they said, literally. And while I usually am able to put them off bad ideas by convincing one of them, this time both were hell-bent on going for it. And once that's the case, all hope is basically lost, as especially my mother can be most stubborn as heck. At least I know who I inherited this trait from. As property co-owner, I technically could have just forbidden my parents to fell those trees on their own. But they're my parents, and I love them. They're adults, they live there, and they keep the stuff in order, so I refrained from taking this route. So I told them that they should go ahead if they really want to, but I would not help them with this. My mom asked if I would help them by cutting it up and then carrying the wood once the trees were laying on the ground. This is an important aspect, and I agreed. Also, I begged them to wait for my sister to call them the next day at lunchtime, since I messaged her about the situation and she wanted to back me up. But no. Next morning, I was woken up by my mother calling me to help cutting up the first tree, which my father had brought down successfully. So I dutifully crawled out of bed and did my part in this little deforestation project. Tree 2 and 3 out of 5 also were felled without any incidents. Then came tree 4. My father had apparently not seen a higher up branch that stretched between the branches of tree 5. So once the chainsaw had fully severed the stem, instead of falling sideways as intended, it got caught up, swirled around its axis, and crashed into the walnut tree, which started to bend significantly due to the load. Now, they wanted me to help move the beech by pushing it to roll along the edge of one of the walnut tree's main branches. Besides me knowing that this was not doable, as I said, a 15-meter high tree is a heavy affair, I refused. "But you said you'd help us once a tree is felled," they pleaded. I pointed out that I'd only assist once it was laying on the ground, and leaning into the walnut tree doesn't quite fit that definition. More pleading, but now it was my time to be stubborn, and rightfully so. Since there was no way to, or machinery, to pull that beech away, my father decided to cut parts of its lower stem until handling would be possible. Multiple laws of physics, however, intervened after he had cut the second large chunk, shifting the center of mass of the beech so that it suddenly started to tilt when its branches prevented it from sliding downwards as intended. Then the walnut tree reacted to the lighter load and shift of the balance by springing back, knocking the beech into the neighbor's barn like a battering ram. The dry wooden wall planks didn't stand a chance and splintered away as the felled tree forced its way into the building, creating an impressive hole. My parents now stood there, dumbfounded. My dad slowly scratched his head and tried to realize the situation, while my mother slowly started to panic. "Oh no, what do we do now? What if the neighbor calls the police on us?" I had watched the spectacle from the balcony and couldn't decide whether to be shocked or to descend into uncontrollable laughter. Closer investigation from outside showed that the tree had crushed a chair, a table, and also caused a cupboard with party equipment to collapse. Though my dad had at least reached his goal and freed the beech from the grasp of the walnut tree. But there was no way of getting it unstuck from the barn without entering. A few hours later, the neighbor, who knew about my parents' plans, returned home, which is where this story might have taken a very bitter and costly turn. But he proved to be a very gracious guy and took the incident, which, in the worst case, could have made the whole barn collapse, in stride. He first was negatively amazed by what had transpired, but after inspection of the barn, he didn't deem it necessary to involve the insurance or the officials and said he would repair the damage by himself if my parents agreed to pay for the materials, the replacement of the destroyed furniture, thanks neighbor, and some beer, probably a lot of beer, for his time, which they gladly accepted. His bill isn't in yet, as he has just begun patching up the hole, but it will easily be upwards of €2,000, roughly $2,400, plus the beer, of course, still making a professional tree removal look like a really good deal. My father offered him to assist with the repairs, and the neighbor thought about it for the fraction of a second and then politely declined. I wonder why. P.S. Tree 5 is still standing. Oh, if it's trees, if it's garage door springs, hire a professional. It's not worth the safety issues and the cost. Hire a pro. Nice job, OP. What do you think about this? Let me know in the comments below. Sick, but you still want me in? Okay. Posted by Hello, I is Clay. Someone else's puke story reminded me of this one. Back in the early 2000s, I worked at UPS loading trucks. I'd been there over a year and was well known throughout the building for picking up shifts and being a good worker, and had gained a bit of seniority in the union. Our normal shift was 5 hours, with anything over 25 hours a week being overtime, so I tried to pick up as many extra shifts as I could. Anyone working in a union shop knows that a lot runs on union seniority, and picking up the extra shift at UPS was the same way. Most seniority got first pick, and it went down the line until the shifts were filled. Early on, I made a reputation of working my butt off, so some of the shift soups would delay asking for a fill-in until some of the senior guys left. As could be expected, this upset a couple people when they got passed over, and I got some FaceTime with the union reps on every shift. Ultimately though, this just led to me becoming friends with the reps and doesn't have any bearing on this story until later. So, as I mentioned, I had a reputation through a lot of the soups of busting my butt, working hard, and always being available. That said, my normal shift soup hated me for some reason. I think it was because he was an old retired military vet, and I was a punk 18-year-old with hair down to my shoulders, piercings, and I didn't give a crap about impressing him in any way, except through loading trucks. With us butting heads, I'd brought up a couple of issues with my union rep friends, but nothing was ever serious enough to push the issue. That is, until I got sick. I was in that state where things were coming out of both ends non-stop. I wasn't getting out of bed for anything if I could help it, so I called in. UPS policy at the time was, as long as you let the soup know something like an hour or more before a shift, it wasn't considered a no-call, no-show. I called right at the hour mark, and my soup told me if I didn't come in, I was going to be written up for no call. Malicious compliance time. I rolled up to the warehouse looking like death. I decided to load up on fluids on the way in preparation for loading trucks after a day of non-stop puking and, yeah. We had to go through security and metal detectors before a half-mile walk to the building and then another quarter-mile or so to my load once inside. Those fluids started coming on up just through security, and I also had to stop in the building on the way to my load to avail myself of the commode. At my load, my soup started going over pre-shift crap while I'm standing towards the back next to a trash can. Those that hadn't been near me on the walk-in had already heard about my compliance, so I had a nice ring of free space around me when I started projectile vomiting into the trash can and over the surrounding area. Immediately, my soup shut down the meeting, told everyone to go to work, then asked me what the F I was doing there in that condition. Oh gee, I don't know, soup. It may have had something to do with you telling me I'd be written up if I come in. I got sent home. Does the story end there? Would I still be typing if it did? The effer decided to still write me up for a no-call, no-show. I WTF'd him when he handed me that write-up, and he said to take it up with the union if I had a problem. Okay, ding ding, round 2. Remember those union rep friends that I'd made from picking up shifts and working my butt off? Yup, I went in search of one and had a chat. He had already heard about my ordeal, a mile worth of warehouse space, and word still traveled faster than it would have if we shared a cubicle, and he knew that I had been in the warehouse puking, and if I was there, how could I have not shown up? And if my soup was the one that sent me home after I showed up, how could the write-up be my fault at all? So he roped in HR. HR was involved in all the official write-ups and hadn't heard the story, but was aware of the write-up. So union rep and I told her the story. She called down and asked the soup to come over to her office, and he came and recounted the same story. When asked if I'd called, he said yes. If asked if I'd still showed, he said yes. When asked if he sent me home, he reiterated that he had. When asked how I could be a no-call, no-show when I'd called, showed, and been sent home, he didn't have an answer. I was dismissed to go back to work, and he was not. Unfortunately, I don't have details on what exactly happened with him. My union rep buddy did say that I wasn't the only one that had been passing along issues for a while, but this was the first they could really do anything about. Being management, soup wasn't part of the union, and the union rep wouldn't say much else other than it was settled. When a union rep tells you it's settled and they can't say more, my experience has been that they're absolutely right. The soup kept his distance and didn't speak much to me afterwards outside of what was absolutely necessary. TLDR, I puked and my supervisor got reamed by the Teamsters. Hey, if you're sick, don't go in because you're going to get everybody else sick. Like seriously, that is a workplace 101. Good job, OP. Set the record. Sorry you had to go through that pretty unfortunate time to do it, but great job. I ruined your weekend. That sucks. Posted by Artilleryman08. About 10 years ago, I was a regional manager for a transportation and logistics company. At the time, each regional office worked as sort of an independent company in that we had our own sales and accounting teams, as well as compliance people like safety and a driver trainer. I'll start by admitting that I never fully got into accounting. I took the class in college, but honestly, it was still confusing. I'm not totally lost looking at the reports, but how they get there is Greek to me. I chalk it up to black magic. Our accounting department was the largest office team with a whopping 3 people, the accounts manager and 2 clerks, 1 for accounts receivable and 1 for accounts payable. All the other teams were just 2 people. We also had maintenance and loading dock crews, but they weren't part of the office. Well, in their infinite wisdom, our corporate office decided that they were going to merge some regions as a cost-saving measure. To be fair, it did save money, but it greatly increased our workload. I had all my departments submit a report on what they needed in order to meet the increased load. The loading dock manager actually had a brilliant plan that involved only hiring 1 new worker, promoting 1 to be an assistant manager, and then putting them on rotating 50-hour weeks. It was cheaper than hiring a bunch of guys, and they all agreed to it. The maintenance shop wanted 2 more mechanics, but this isn't about them. The accounts manager asked for 2 additional A&R clerks. I was hesitant at first, but then I saw the amount of paperwork that they had to process now, so I authorized it. The accounts manager used the spreadsheets, along with necromancy, to summon billing documents from the void to send to our customers. It was a pretty efficient system. I had a policy regarding overtime. Department managers had discretion to hand out overtime up to 10 hours a week as long as they could justify it reasonably. However, if a manager required a subordinate to work overtime, the manager would work the same overtime. Our managers were salaried and exempted from overtime, and I didn't want them working their people all the time while they only worked 40 hours. Amazingly, after I implemented this policy, overtime went way down. I mention this because, at year-end, the accounting team always needed a ton of overtime in order to get all the closing work done on top of their normal duties. It usually involved them working as much as 80 hours a week for the whole month of January, and usually they only finished at last minute. I usually gave them a 4-day weekend at the end. The accounts manager was usually pretty cool, not entitled, and did a good job. But this particular year, when we had even more work to do, she tried to pull a really BS move. In the middle of January, as they were all working a ton to get through year end, she announces that she'll be gone for a weekend to go to a concert with some of her friends. So I asked her if she had a plan in place to make up for the lost work time with no one here working on the weekend. She looked at me confused. "But the clerks will still be here." I say, "Only if you are too. You are familiar with my policy. I'm okay with you all taking the weekend off, but I need to know that all the year-end work will be done in time." "I do have a plan. They are working the weekend to cover for my absence." To be fair, her clerks probably didn't care, and I would have been willing to ease up on the policy in this case because she usually was pretty good about this stuff. However, her tone completely changed that. I'm easygoing, but my subordinates do not dictate to me how things are going to be, and I told her as much. I finished with, "Either you are all working this weekend, or none of you are. Let me know by the end of the day." In the end, she couldn't figure out a reasonable way to make up for the lost time, and she was at the office with her team. I was there too because my policy applied to me as well. The only exception I gave myself was the loading dock crew because there was always someone there on overtime. The accounts manager was pretty cold towards me the whole time, and on Sunday, she informs me that I ruined her weekend. I considered pulling her aside to let her know that sorting through driver paperwork for 12 hours a day wasn't my weekend plan either, but instead just nodded and said, "That sucks." A few weeks later, she did apologize for her behavior, and I told her I was sorry she missed her concert, and that unfortunately, that's a part of working life. Sometimes we miss out on things. Funny enough, she said that her friends thought the concert sucked really bad, and even told her that she was lucky she didn't have to go. And yes, the way we did accounting was stupid. I fought my higher-ups over it for 4 years. I also fought to get the higher temps to help year-end, but after 2 years, they let me get 3 for the month. It helped a lot. My overtime policies cut annual overtime for the office down so much that I got everyone under me a 15% pay increase. So, I stand by it. Do everything to keep a salesman from selling? Okay, let's see how that works out for your boss. Posted by Anonymous B315. In college, I worked for a computer parts store in their build your own section. Let's call this place Macro Point. I was a good seller and made a ton of money, something like $2,400 a check. I was very happy and feeling myself. I even bought a shirt that said DJ Breadwinner and would wear it under my nice clothes all the time. The job was easy if you follow 2 simple rules. 1. Never sell them something they don't need, and 2. The customer only has the options you give them. The latter seems a bit disingenuous, but if you follow 1, you'll never go wrong with 2. My 2 biggest abilities were that A, I helped everyone and was very polite and energetic, so I got a lot of repeat customers who would wait and deal only with me, and B, I could sell warranties like nobody's business. The warranties were easy to sell since we had an accidental damage plan on most items and one that replaced components in a build if you paid us to build it. I would simply say something like, you want to buy the accidental damage plan? It may be expensive, but it lasts 3 years. Put that date in your phone, on your calendar, a week before it's up, throw this son up against the wall, and then come get the latest model for free. The plan says they might ask a few questions, but the truth is they didn't. With accidental damage, bring in a broke item, get the same, or if that's not available, usually not, get the latest price equivalent model. Most people took that bet, and I was successful. Things were great until we got a new manager for our department. We'll call him Incompetito. He was, as his name implies, incompetent. He had come over from Circuit Metropolis and had been a store manager or something. Their business had just folded. He brought all kinds of new and stupid ideas to the department. The worst was switching how we did the cleaning and stocking. Before, we cleaned at night and stocked periodically in the early morning when it was slow when the truck came. Incompetito wanted us to clean in the morning, so we were on the floor for the early morning customers and then stock at night, because anything that wasn't fully stocked in our department through the day went up when we merchandised at night and cleaned. I think he was just trying to stop us from getting overtime or something, which was stupid because we made like $5 an hour plus commission. Our hourly wage was crap. The biggest problem here is that the things off the truck are in the system, so when a customer wants something, the system says we have it and it's not on the shelf. We have to waste time not being on the floor, going to look for things in the pallets, and that hurts our sales. This is a completely stupid idea that failed spectacularly, and I earned the ire of Incompetito by going to the store manager after our objections were ignored and explaining it. I may have earned his undying ire when he told the store manager that was the way they did it back at Circuit Metropolis, and I remarked that was probably why they went out of business. In my defense, screw Incompetito, he was costing me like $500 a check. Eventually, this got fixed, but a new issue started, and this one was really annoying. Now, we were not allowed to sell in other departments unless they were connected to or upsells on our builds. TV, Apple, games, and general section in the middle of the store. I and others had mastered upselling whole TVs instead of monitors and gaming peripherals and all that. We got a higher percentage of peripherals than core sales, so making a TV a peripheral was big money. Incompetito, who was trying to buddy up to the hot chick who ran the department, had forbid us to upsell TVs or hand that off as a separate thing for the TV people. This did not go over well in our department. As the lead salesman in my department, I was particularly PO'd, but he threatened write-ups for anyone who disobeyed, and the store manager was tired of us going around Incompetito, so he just started saying it's his department. He eventually forbade us from upselling anywhere else in the store. I'm like, cool, bet. Cue the malicious compliance. You see, even if it's from other departments, if the sale starts in our department, the numbers are attributed to our department. This here affects Incompetito's bonus, but also the only reason more TVs were being sold in the first place was that we were convincing gamers to get big TVs and use them as monitors instead of monitors. So when we stopped doing that, units stopped going out with the same frequency and the numbers for our department dropped sharply. It was actually rough to get all the salespeople to just stick to our department and not go around Incompetito, but it only took about 2 months for anyone to start noticing the problem. They called a meeting of the departments and we talked about the TV and the BOIO underperforming. When they asked why, I feigned ignorance and just said we were following what Incompetito said. We let the store manager slowly piece together why things were happening. Incompetito got chewed out, and TV lady, let's call her Legs for Days, was also chewed out. We didn't know why at first, but apparently she'd done this to the manager before the manager that hired me. The one before Incompetito was a woman, but her predecessor was a man. Apparently, Legs for Days had a way of flirting and getting special treatment for her department and taking advantage of idiots like Incompetito. I'd like to say that this was the end and Incompetito eased up and got out of the way, but nah, he was petty and a jerk. He conspired with Snake, someone of his own culture, to get rid of me. I found this out because Snake was popular with the girls, but also talked too much. He would allow Snake to upsell in our area and had one of the girls often remove my sticker and put Snake's on it. He started scheduling me at weird times and started selling the store manager on the idea that I was detrimental to the morale of the department. A lot of them were lazy and relied on the pool. And when you don't help someone and then they buy something, the money goes into the pool and it's distributed amongst the entire department. If it doesn't look like it's a big bill, then some folks would just go to the pool. I did not. I helped everyone and turned small items into big purchases. Admittedly, that hurt everyone else's pockets, but we were told to help everyone and to absolutely not be lazy and let things go to the pool. So the weird way it ended up being explained to me is that if I sold 10 of an item, I got paid, let's say, $100 because of a multiplier or whatever. But if I sold 5 and then someone else sold 5, no one would get the multiplier, and then thus they would just pay each $40 or something instead of paying the $100 for the same amount of merch being sold. It was all convoluted and sounded like a BS excuse, but Incompacito ended up convincing them that they couldn't afford me right then. Normally they fire people on the spot because we've got a high risk of theft, but they let me work those last 2 weeks. I asked what he expected me to do, and they told me, I expect you to sell. So, sell I did. Cue malicious compliance too. I was going to show them what they were losing. I wanted them to feel my absence. I was determined to try and break the sales record my last few days and totally came close. I was averaging something like $7,800 in sales, way up from my $3,000 a day, which still had me around the best of the best. See, the record was somewhere around $14,000 in a day, and I had hit $11,000 and $13,000, but sadly could not hit the record. But my numbers were insane during that time. My last check was stupid high. But alas, Incompacito did manage to get me out of there, though store manager said he'd hire me back if things changed. Instead, Incompacito waited a month and moved Snake into my place in the department. Needless to say, their numbers were not the same. I didn't get my closure on this until about 4 months later when I found Incompacito and store manager had been fired. They opened a Bengal Direct across the way and MacroPoint had been losing clients and money. Worse, apparently my department hadn't really recovered from my loss. Things came to a head at a quarterly meeting when the regional manager came to present the top sales awards, and apparently I'd won it, even missing 2 months or so of sales. No one had told him I'd been fired, so he looked like an idiot trying to present the reward. There was a banner and everything. I also found out that Snake got fired for 2 separate offenses: stealing, which they were investigating, and then doing stuff with one of the cashiers in the back, which led to his immediate termination. It had come out that Incompacito had caught Snake before doing something inappropriate and just gave him a vague write-up. That, the debacle with me, and the low sales got Incompacito fired. I received a call to see if I wanted to come back, but I already taken on extra classes by then. That is truly epic if you know that you were getting screwed and then you came back and took the W. Very nice job. You won't settle until I send a file type your computer will open? Okay, posted by Meowschwitz in there. Client comes in with a seemingly simple auto collision. Client was hit, other driver got out and said something like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay? I'm so sorry, I dropped my phone and I reached to get it." Client had a dash cam which recorded the whole thing, including the admission of guilt. Easy client, right? Turns out the admission was really important because the type of accident didn't make a determination of fault easy. Imagine a rear-end collision at a red light as an easy determination, but a collision at a 4-way stop sign as a hard determination. When the cops showed up, the police report found both drivers at fault and did not mention any statements from the other driver. But we have our admission and my client's damages were above the other guy's policy limit, so I send a demand to the insurance company for policy limits. Note that the insurance company has an obligation to negotiate in good faith, which becomes important later. Lawyer from insurance reaches out and says, basically, look, my client says they were driving safely and the police report says shared fault. The initial offer is like 10 grand. I replied, yeah, but my client had a dash cam and it recorded your client admitting fault. It's important to understand that this was before dash cams were common. It wasn't my first case with a dash cam, but it might have been my 3rd or 4th. No mention of the dash cam was made on the police report. Insurance attorney says, I imagine while twirling a dumb mustache, interesting, can you send me a copy of the video? I said sure and send it over. He replies, I can't open this. So I send him a link to VLC Media Player. It's a weird extension and Windows Media Player won't play it, but VLC will. Just follow the installer instructions and it should play, no problem. He says, I'm not installing something to watch your alleged dashcam video. Send me a file I can play if you want me to consider it. This makes me unhappy, but I tried again. It will take less than a few minutes to install. You can watch the video and listen to your client admit fault. He says, we're done here until you send something that I can play. Cue malicious compliance music, country grammar. Start super cool montage of me going through other client files. Stop montage as I open a file and my face is bathed in a golden light radiating from an old Memorex CD. So I found a different dashcam video which did not contain any sound, but it could be played with a Windows Media... So I found a different dashcam video, which did not contain any sound, but it could be played through Windows Media Player, and it was close enough to my current client's fax that if you weren't paying attention, it could pass. Other attorney just asked for a file he could play, right? I sent it over. He says, "Wow, no sound. Guess you're done, buddy." So I sued. During discovery, I sent a CD over which included the original video and a copy of VLC. He must have ignored it because he didn't say anything about it. During a pretrial motion hearing, I played the video for the judge. The judge might have heard the other lawyer's jaw hit his desk. The insurance attorney says, "Your Honor, this is not the video he sent to me." In my mind's eye, I see the malicious compliance Death Star preparing to fire. "Judge, I thought he might say that. Here's a copy of our emails where I described the video, provided the video, and sent instructions on how to play it. Here is a copy of the CD I sent with discovery, which also has a video and a copy of VLC. Finally, here is a copy of the unrelated video which I sent to fulfill his request of something he could play." Other attorney asked for a recess. Because he refused the initial demand of policy limits I told him, I would argue that he did not negotiate in good faith. We settled for well above the policy limits. Client was very happy. P.S. Don't go to law school. #not worth. Hey, that was his fault. He dropped the ball and you just threw him another one and he could not catch that one either, and you won. Very nice job. Man in isolation demands extra smoke breaks, fakes illness symptoms trying to manipulate us. We transfer him to a more restrictive quarantine instead. Posted by Astacask. I'm a paramedic, and lately I've been working at an isolation facility in the Canadian oil field, and it's just terrible. It brings out the worst in a lot of people, and it's kind of understandable. And once COVID is over, you could give me the choice between going back to this job or living with my member inside an anthill for the rest of my life, and I'd be slathering my loins in honey before you finish that sentence. How it works is we have a lot of large oil facilities in the area, and spring is when they shut them down, bring in hordes of workers from coast to coast, and perform maintenance as quickly as possible to get that sweet black gold flowing again. It was pretty much universally ignored how effing bad an idea that would be this year, and you'd never guess what resulted: a big old dumpster fire. An increase in cases was planned for. One entire work camp that could accommodate 1,110 was set aside for positive or symptomatic patients, and a few wings at another camp for about 200 people, where we kept asymptomatic close contact cases, no symptoms or confirmed sickness. The oil companies paid the hospitality bill, and the workers that couldn't isolate at home had somewhere to stay. For anyone trying to picture a work camp, it's less gulag and more Motel 6. Private bathroom, single or double-sized bed, TV, Wi-Fi, yada yada. Just picture a mediocre motel, but a little smaller room size. 3 square meals a day, cooked in a kitchen or dining hall. It's usually served buffet style, but delivered to isolation rooms by medical staff because the kitchen staff's union rightfully said, heck no. The only thing that sucks about this camp is being isolated and monitored. I don't make the rules, and I don't even technically enforce them. I just tell people what the government has made law and why it's inadvisable to break them, or, in other words, F around and find out. People were free to leave at will, but they'd face serious legal issues. It wasn't a prison, and I didn't make the regulations. 14 full days in isolation was the mandate, and yes, it was inconvenient for everyone so required. I ended up at the smaller site where we didn't store active cases, thankfully, not because of risk, but the 1,100 person facility, being the dumping ground, was filling up fast and manpower was stretched to the breaking point. Our duties were mostly very non-EMS related. Drop off food, deliver booze, invade faces with nasal swabs, vitals, check people in, chaperone smoke breaks, and miscellaneous concierge things. My coworkers and I made efforts for our patients because it really is a stressful and crappy situation for them. Most people were pretty chill, if not outright pleasant toward us, but unfortunately we had a sizable group of loud, mean-spirited, entitled, and belligerent man-children. These enormous a-holes complained about everything, from the government to the quality of steaks that they weren't paying for, and they also serenaded us with threats, profanity, death camp comparisons, general prickishness, conspiracies, anti-vaccine garbage, and angry yet vague tirades about their rights. This kind of hot garbage isn't uncommon for this province. We're basically Canada's Florida Panhandle, and come complete with all the lunatics and tomfoolery. This is not a work environment I greatly enjoyed, but I did have a moment of catharsis when I clapped back at our standout problem child. Mr. P, as I'll call him, was that rare 1 in a billion a-hole, a repugnant narcissist and sharp as a marble. His Medal of Honor citation includes the following highlights: hurling his lunch at the wall opposite his room door because he didn't like tuna, threats against other patients and one staff member, staggering out of his room to pass out in the hallway, wrecked on rum and near buck naked, perving on female staff members, smoking constantly in his room with the door propped open, turning it up to 11 while watching adult movies, screaming at an adjacent parking lot from his window while trashed at 9 a.m., and sneaking out on the back door while unescorted whenever he felt like it, and to meet a delivery driver after we took his booze away, all while breaking quarantine. Hilariously and obviously trying to forge the date on his information sheet taped to his door so he'd be out sooner, but we track it all in Excel, and, well, being himself. All this was in a 72-hour period, and we literally couldn't kick him out. Where else would he go? He was under quarantine. An amazing amount of forgiveness was extended to him by the camp operator and the oil company because of the stress of being quarantined. Eventually, Mr. P gets a visit and talking to by the RCMP, the police, call from his boss and the camp manager, all of which seem to have made an impact. All parties were thoroughly fed up with his crap, and although he wouldn't be evicted, he would be, if he carried on, be facing a ban for life from every site owned by the oil company, fired from his job, and fined by the police. With his booze confiscated, I assumed he might behave closer to the 55-year-old man he is, but as it turns out, that was naive. I interacted with him more than anyone else, and I bit that bullet because I'm the veteran, the most jaded, and also, for some reason, he didn't sexually harass me. Unhappy with being unable to smoke in his room or wander around breaking quarantine as he chose, he picked me to use as his grievance. Every day we had 8 15-minute breaks scheduled to take people to smoke or just to get outside. As a chaperone, we would ensure no patients would touch door handles. We'd politely remind them about distance and not to pass out smokes to others. Mr. P didn't like the schedule, demanded, not asked, for more breaks, longer breaks, and breaks at the times he wanted. We'd honor some requests for favors, usually, perhaps take a worker or for a couple extra breaks. Doing the odd favor never bothered me for normal patients, but in his case, I would rather lick a cheese grater than expend 1 extra calorie for his comfort. My response to his whining was a hard no and no negotiation. He could follow the schedule or risk his job by smoking in the room again. He wasn't special, and we were just staffed enough to handle our workload already. I might have done him a solid if he promised me that he would use that time to go play in highway traffic. He grabbed my attention when I was handing out some lunches, and this is when the above request was gleefully denied. It was about an hour later when we got a call from Mr. P. He wasn't feeling good and he needed a checkup. I grabbed my kit and monitor thinking I had paramedic crap to do, but not believing I'd be lucky enough to have him actually be dying. He opens the door complaining of a cough and sore, dry throat. He put on the full act and I did my due diligence for funsies, took full vitals and notes, and he then piped up with some conspicuously prepared lines. "It's just stuffy in here. I don't think I need any medicine, just some air. Extra fresh air would probably clear this up. Yada, yada." His brain must be smooth enough to skip across a pond if he put faith in this cartoonish scheme. I just imagine his inner dialogue. "I'll just fake sick to get the thing he just refused to give me an hour ago. No one will suspect a thing." "Well," I say to him, "thank you for reporting your development of symptoms. If you could have your suitcases packed in the next hour, a vehicle will be arriving to take you to this other facility." Baffled, his master plan crumbled instantly. He made a futile effort to backtrack. Was he lying? Extremely likely. Just his bad luck, I take my patients at their word. I reported it, recorded it, and sent it up the ladder to my superiors immediately. No backsies, butthole. We ship out symptomatic and positive cases, and that made him someone else's problem, already a W. The other place is also much worse. Between the huge and unexpected inflow of cases, staff shortage, staff being overwhelmed, they get maybe 1 to 2 smoke breaks a day. Food is worse, late or arrives cold, rooms are smaller, and with all the positive cases, their security is increased. Sucks, I feel for all the guys there. I'll accept him. Oh, and because he developed symptoms, his quarantine days were reset from 7 to 14. Dude talked himself into another week of legally mandated isolation. What if you had to live with this guy? Let me know in the comments below. These next 2 stories are awesome and really funny. Let's start. Whatever chainsaw I want, you say? Posted by Nomad65555. This malicious compliance is not my own, but of a friendly, vindictive old man who I'll call Fred that I worked with for around 5 months. As many of you know, I, an 18-year-old male, do tree work for a living, and I have for around 2 years now. My boss, who I'll call Duncan, is a 32-year-old hotshot and the owner of our small company, who can sometimes be a real tool when things aren't going fast enough on a job. Now, Duncan has an old family friend named Fred. Fred worked with Duncan's stepfather at a cement plant for 20 years and is his stepfather's best friend. Fred also retired from said cement plant. Fred is the kind of man who would give you the shirt off his back while being an absolute vindictive smart aleck about you not having a shirt. However, Fred was working for Duncan as a favor since Duncan was understaffed at the time. Because of this, Fred couldn't give a flying flip about his job or what Duncan said or did. Fred took as many breaks as he wanted, when he wanted to, and wouldn't hesitate to tell you where to stick your opinion if you said something about it. Fred's also a complete bull of a man who stands at a hearty 6 foot 3 inches and 275 pounds, and easily makes Duncan, 5'10 and 160, look like a shrimp. So usually, Duncan isn't too quick to bother him. So one day we were all doing our thing on the job. We had a big old pin oak to take down, so we were all in our usual positions. Jake up in the bucket truck, James running our loader, and Fred and I chipping brush and shooting the breeze, although I'll admit we were slightly slacking off. Duncan decided he was going to sharpen all the chainsaws that were not currently in use, so he gets to work. Now, for those of you who don't know, sharpening a saw takes a while, and on top of that, all our saws were extremely dull, so they took a lot of sharpening in 95-degree heat, while being stooped down on the door of one of the boxes on our bucket truck. Duncan was sharpening saws for the better part of 2 hours. That's 8 saws. When he finished, we had the vast majority of the tree cut down. All the branches were off, and Fred and I had long since shut down the chipper. And we were taking our lunch since we had nothing to do, as wood is moved from the ground to the dump trailer by James in the loader. For some reason, the fact that we had 20 minutes more work infuriated Duncan. This is especially odd because the tree was coming down very quickly compared to usual, as it was Friday, and we were all hoping to cut off early as we sometimes did. Duncan flew off the handle, screaming at us for the better part of 10 minutes, which ironically extended us to 30 minutes more on the job rather than 20, and he ended his tirade with, "I'm leaving to go do estimates finish and go cut firewood at the yard. You will not be cutting off a second before 3:30. As Duncan stormed away, Fred piped up from the back of the group, just as sweet as pie with anticipation dripping from his voice. "Hey, lipstick, which one you want us to use?" To which Duncan replied, "I don't give a frick," and stormed away. Me and Fred smiled at each other, thinking the same thing. When we arrived back at the yard, we began getting saws off the truck, from the smallest of trim saws to the largest brand spanking new Steel MS-881 Magnum with a 42-inch bar that we used to cut particularly large stubs. Me and Fred both grabbed a saw and fired him up. We began to cut and cut and cut and cut. For almost 3 hours we cut firewood, making sure to hit the dirt with the saws as much as possible, and going through every saw until they were almost unusable from how dull they were. Trust me, if anyone knows how to dull a saw quick, it's a tree professional. Fred and I were having the time of our lives, dancing and singing and cracking jokes while we cut, while screaming to be heard over the painful wailing of the saws being tortured. When 3:30 rolled around, we threw the saws back in the truck and went home, and I still swear to this day that I heard Fred singing at the top of his lungs as he rolled out of the lane in a cloud of black smoke, which may have been his crankshaft eating some gaskets. Monday, when we get to work, we rolled out to the job site, and Duncan fired up the mammoth steel to crash a huge hickory tree in the middle of the woods. He began to cut, or should I say grind, the tree. The wood was smoking from the terrible amount of friction from a saw that was as dull as it could get. Duncan stopped. He checked the chain. He got another saw and checked the chain. Dull. He went through every saw and checked chains, getting redder and redder. He walked over to me and Fred. "Fred, Blake, why is every saw dull?" To which Fred responded, "Well, Duncan, you told us that you don't give a frick which saw we used, so we used them all. That shouldn't be an issue, right, since you don't give a frick." To which Duncan sighed, knowing exactly what he did, and walked off to sharpen all the saws again. Fred was, is, and always will be my hero and my best friend. He is currently back to living the retired life of working on cars and fishing. Many days I miss him and his offhanded comments, but I'm carrying on his legacy of smart buttery. Just as a disclaimer, Duncan is not a bad boss at all. In fact, he's the best boss I've ever had. He just has this mindset that time is money and that some things should go faster than they possibly ever could. Man, I'll tell you what, real quick, this story reminds me of when you go tell somebody, "Hey, put some peanut butter on this sandwich," and they actually put the jar on your bread because you didn't tell them to open the jar first and get the knife out and put the peanut butter on the bread. Oh, this is a funny story. I love it. Way to go, dude. The future's so bright, I gotta wear shades, posted by recommendation number 191. I worked up north in oil and gas doing site facility maintenance, and I started the job when the boom was happening, but we soon started down the backside and cuts were made. In order to cut costs, they cut our overtime, our hours, took away our flights because it was fly in and fly out, and generally made life miserable. I could see the writing on the wall, and I was an unticketed carpenter, so I decided to go back to school and get my JM papers. Before I went on my school break, we got a new journeyman, and he asked us how we can live on X amount of wages and pay for our flights as well. We told him that our wages are X plus 10. The company was paying new hires about $10 an hour less than us, which explained why they were trying to get people to quit so that they could replace them with cheaper labor. I had arrangements to do 3rd and 4th all year together, but as my school day was coming up, they started talking about putting off my year 4, messing me around. It took me over a year waiting to get into that class, so I wasn't going to put it off. I decided to quit if they messed me, but I didn't tell them. So this is near the end of the calendar year, and school was November and December for year 3 and January, February for year 4. The first thing that I did was to schedule 100% of my dental benefits for December, me and my 2 kids. I also scheduled whatever else we could do dentally for the new year, early January. We also had a Visa account that was $1,000 per year for health spending. You could use it at the dentist for whatever wasn't covered. You could go to the pharmacy, the optometrist, those kind of things. So I went to Joe's Optometry and bought some sweet glasses for reading that had a picture of a horse with a guy with a stick and a little ball on it. I also got every bell and whistle for the lenses. Perfect customer. But that's not the compliance. The salesperson, bless her soul, offered me sunglasses, and I said I couldn't do that, it's only for health. She told me the insurance company doesn't get the itemized receipt, they just see Joe's Optical for X amount of dollars. Oh yeah, I'm in with some sweet Ray-Bans with 2 pairs of polarized lenses, no problem. So the company I worked for had a bunch of contracts, and there were about 800 employees in total. I'd say about 60% of them were single males, about 10% females, and the rest married guys. We had a junior Sparky who is all about bling, so I told him he can go to the optometrist with his card and get sunglasses. I told everyone on our shift, screw them, free sunglasses. I might not have overtime anymore, but hey, thanks for the sunglasses. And waited. And nothing happened. I was expecting everyone to be sending messages thanking me for the loophole, but nothing. So I showed Sparky the receipt and my Visa card number to prove that I had done it. The next day, I see him on Facebook with a new pair of sunglasses, saying that he had also ordered some limited edition Ferrari sunglasses from his local optometrist. Initially, he didn't believe me, but now he was all in. I picked the Sparky because he was about bling, but he was also with the company since day 1, and he knew absolutely everyone, including people on the other job sites. 800 people. Back to me. Because of the turnaround schedule, I was scheduled to go back to work somewhere around January 10th after they had unilaterally changed the deal. In school, we weren't allowed to miss days, so my kids and I had all of our dental work done in the Christmas break on the January side. Lucky for me. I also asked the dentist if I could pay it forward and pay for 2 cleaning sessions sometime in the next year. I used our Visa health card. What was left, I went back to the optometrist and I got 2 more pairs of sunglasses. I used up my Visa card and my yearly dental allowance in the first week of January. I officially quit the day before they forced me back to work. My coworkers told me in the middle of January there was a company-wide meeting about sweeping changes to the benefit program. They were changing companies to become more streamlined, and the benefits naturally were sharply decreased. The Visa health card vanished. My guess is because they had a $500,000 optometry bill. I finished school in the top 3 and happily had $10,000 worth of dental and $2,000 worth of sunglasses and glasses paid for in the last week of December and the first week of January. Not only do I wear my sunglasses at night, but the future's so bright, I gotta wear shades. Oh, that is some malicious compliance, man. You made out like a bandit. No joke. Way to go, OP. I bent the rules and gave you a $50 discount and you're still not happy? Enjoy the $15 one instead that you were initially meant to get. Posted by Dumb Stupid Idiot. I used to work at a call center for a large Canadian telecommunications company. They're a service provider for TV, internet, home phones, and cell phones. I was a customer care agent, and at the time, I was working in the end of the promotions department. I'd be the person you speak with when your 1 or 2 year discount was set to expire. I had been through many different departments before I was moved to the end of promotion team, so I had access to multiple discounts a regular care agent wouldn't have access to because they never changed my authorization when I moved to the new department. This allowed me to bend the rules quite a bit when it came to renewing promotions for some customers. Now, most care agents have limited discounts they can give. Typically, the system would generate a discount for a customer's account based on their tenure and services with us. That's what the company claimed, which I find to be bullcrap, as I've seen accounts that were created back in 1999 that would be tagged for only $10 off, and sometimes nothing at all, and they would have to pay in market rates. This is where my access level came in handy. If I spoke with a customer who was super polite and gave me no trouble or stress, I would apply a better discount than what was originally tagged, especially if I see they've been with us for years and sometimes even decades. So, for example, tagged for $20 off, give $35 or $40 off instead. Now, the company always claimed that they keep track if we apply discounts that a customer wouldn't be eligible for, but I think that was also bullcrap because I did this to many accounts and it never came up during meetings with my manager. So one day, I get a call, a customer that's been with the company for a year or two. Let's call him Mark. So Mark's promotion is coming to an end pretty soon, and he's looking to get a new one, and at the same time upgrade his services. He was on a mid-tier TV package and had 500 megabits per second unlimited internet. If I recall, he was probably paying around $140 a month. He wanted to move up to our highest TV package in our gigabit internet plan, which is the highest you can get for both TV and internet with this company. And this said company is not a budget service provider, so typically that combination of products will cost around $180 before taxes, and the price just climbs up depending on how many boxes you have for the TV, if you have a home phone, and if you have any extra TV add-ons. So I tell him I will gladly look into it and I place him on hold. Since he was very polite and I was in a good mood, I was happy to bend the rules for him, especially after seeing he was only tagged for a $15 discount. He had a $25 discount before, so he would have been paying $10 more if he wanted to keep his services the same, and definitely a whole lot more if he upgraded to the highest packages. So eventually I come back to him with a $50 discount for 1 year. He will still be paying more for making the change, but it's a whole lot better than the $15 off that he was supposed to get initially. Now, all of a sudden, his attitude and tone does a complete 180. He starts getting angry and starts getting rude. He was talking as if he thought I was joking when I said $50 is the most we could give him. He went on a rant about how he's been with us for so many years and how he deserves to pay less than what he was paying before, and on top of that, get upgraded services. I explained that, unfortunately, because he is upgrading to our highest packages, then the increase in price is inevitable. I informed him that if he wanted to, the same discount could be applied to his current services, and he'd be saving $25 more than what he's been paying. Then he pulls the same card I hear so often. Well, my friend has that package and he's only paying $80. Or, I see newer customers getting it for so much less. Which, in most cases, sure, it can happen, but with the combination of products he has, I know 100% he was just pulling those prices right out of his butt. Now, he got angrier and was demanding that he gets a better discount, and on top of that, he wanted the Crave Movies and HBO add-on, which costs $19.99, for free, for a year, on top of that, for wasting his time. I start to get frustrated and explain once again that it's not something that we can do and that $50 is the best we can offer. He asked to speak to retention, which at the time was the end of the promotion department, and I explained that, well, he's already speaking with them. He starts to lose it and says he wants to speak to a manager because he wants to pay what he feels like he should pay based on his tenure, which, again, was only around 2 years, which may seem like a long time, but in this kind of industry, it doesn't mean much. We do have a dedicated team of managers that take calls when a customer is going crazy. Their primary goal is just to diffuse the situation, but they are not there to give better discounts if we already went through the best options, and they always made that very clear. I explained that a manager cannot provide a better discount, but I can still transfer him to one, as it is company policy to get them to a manager if they request one, no matter what. So I place him on hold, and what we do is speak to the manager on the line first to explain the situation and all the options that we as an agent went through before escalating, and then they take the call from there. Usually you're supposed to disconnect from the call once you patch the customer through, but sometimes I like to stick around and mute myself just to listen to the manager tell the customer the exact same thing I already told them. Their reactions are usually priceless. So I explained to the manager, we'll call him Fred, that I had already offered the customer a way better discount than what he had before. I was worried that they would question why or how I gave them more than what they was tagged for, but this manager didn't seem to care. I explained how now he wanted to pay less than what he used to pay while upgrading to our highest package, and now, on top of that, have a $20 add-on given to him for free for a year. Fred scoffs because they understood how ridiculous that was and told me to patch him through. I add Mark to the call, introduce him to Fred, and explain that they'll take the call from there. Now, all of a sudden, he's acting very polite again and says, "Oh, thank you so much, OP. I hope you have a good rest of your day. Take care." And continues this act while he talks to the manager as if he wasn't just screaming at the top of his lungs at me moments ago. I stick around to hear the conversation play out. Fred does a quick rundown of what Mark was asking us to do just to make sure nothing was missed, and Mark says, "Yep, that all sounds right to me." Then Fred pretty much tells him what he is asking for cannot be done, and that I had already offered the best discount we can provide, and explained that most customers pay way more for what he's being upgraded to. He starts getting angry again and starts yelling that he's being mistreated as a long-term customer and is threatening to cancel all of his services with us and move to a competitor. Fred says he's sorry he feels that way and that if he would like, they can start the cancellation procedure for him. Mark had had enough and hung up right after. I got a kick from hearing that and went on with my day. A month goes by. I'm taking calls and having a good day. It's slow, not a lot of callers, but the ones I do get have been very nice. And suddenly, a call comes in. The account pops up. I do a quick look over the account summary and see the customer's name. It looks familiar. I check the account's previous interactions and see mine and Fred's from a month ago. A big smile goes across my face as I am speaking to none other than Mark, calling us back again. Now, this kind of thing is very rare. With a company this big, we typically have a lot of callers and a lot of employees, so it's extremely uncommon that I speak to the same person more than once. I'm thinking because it was a slow day, they'd given early leave to the agents who wanted it, so there must not have been a lot of agents online taking calls, thus having this call routed to me since I was unavailable. I do the standard greeting, "Thank you for calling, how can I help?" But in the inside, I've got a crap-eating grin on my face because I know that he's most likely calling us back because his discount had expired and his price had gone up. He's either calling to cancel or to try and get a discount again. I was right on the nose with that one. He calls saying that his discount has expired and he's looking to get a new one. Now, Mark didn't seem to recognize that he was talking to me again. He thought I was just a different agent because he mentioned he was given an offer from someone about a month ago that he was looking to accept. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. As per our last call, you said you wanted a discount based off your tenure? Sure thing. As a matter of fact, the system has already generated a whopping $15 based on that. I explained that unfortunately, because he's calling after his discount has ended, the original discount we had offered is now expired, and now we only have a $15 discount available. He starts to lose it again. Now, in some cases, this actually does happen, where if a discount isn't accepted before the other one expires, the new offer also expires and cannot be added. I can agree that it's some slimy crap that this company does so they can get more money. In this case, because the original $50 discount was never supposed to be given in the first place, I was able to say this and only offer what he was really tagged for. Once again, he begins to lose it. It plays out the same as it did last time. I explain that this is the best we can offer, and he throws a fit and wants to speak to a manager. Again, managers are not there to apply better discounts. Sometimes we do have something called a documented promise, where if in the notes someone was offered something, say $50 off, and it didn't go through, we can still apply it. He could have lied and said that he accepted it and it never went through, and the documented promise policy would have made it so that we had to give him that discount. In this case, because Fred and I both wrote in the notes that he declined that offer, it was gone for good. I once again transfer him to a manager and stick around to hear the fallout. The manager did not budge, told him the same thing, that $15 off was the only option, and once again, it ends with him hanging up. I unfortunately never figured out what happened with Mark's account, but here's what could have happened. 1, he is still paying the in-market price for his services, which is a lot more than what he was paying before. 2, he accepted the $15 off and is still paying more than before. Or 3, he canceled with us and moved to a competitor. One less problematic, rude, and entitled customer. Moral of the story, be nice to the other person on the phone. If you're nice, an agent will most likely be more willing to go above and beyond for you. If you're a jerk, at least in my case, I'm doing the bare minimum for you and definitely will not bend the rules for you. Again, most agents can't do that anyways, and in this case, I had access to these discounts most likely by mistake, so you should still be nice to the person on the other end of the phone, regardless. Man, what a story. I tell you, that is so true. A lot of times we get on the phone with people and we forget that it's a real, live human being on the other end of that call. So whenever you're online, whenever you're on the phone, don't forget, you're typing or talking to a real person just like you and me. You want us to be factual in our report about Mindy? Okay, we'll be factual. Posted by Cathjoy. This is actually the second Cathjoy story I've read, and she's a great writer. You'll like this. Let's dive in. Last week, I shared a story about my awful colleague Mindy. I never expected it to blow up like it did. However, it wasn't the first time Mindy and our manager were hit with the cold can of malicious compliance. So, I thought I'd share the story. I can't take full credit for it. It was a team effort, as you'll see. Upper management decided to trial a new system where colleagues would rate each other. The rules were that all comments had to be constructive. We couldn't write anything spiteful or untrue or based on gossip. So you could write stuff like, Austin is always supportive and offers help when I need it, or Austin communicates clearly, and so on. Basically, they wanted us to think about how our colleagues helped us and what they contributed to the team. They hoped it would help gauge how well the team worked together and encourage them to be positive about each other. These reviews were to be handed to a manager, and only the manager was allowed to read them. As you can imagine, this was tricky when it came to Mindy. For those of you who haven't read my previous story, Mindy fancied herself the queen bee of the office, and she tattled on everyone for petty stuff, like using too many staples or being a few minutes late, and she even kept a tally of how long each of us took going to the bathroom or getting a drink. She was overall a very toxic person. Worst of all, she was our manager's favorite, so she basically got away with everything. I tried to be as diplomatic as possible and wrote that her constant monitoring of our bathroom and drink breaks made me uncomfortable, and that maybe she needed more training because she frequently came to me with complicated queries that were actually pretty standard, or dumping complex cases on me because she said she didn't have time. Again, I wrote them in a way that wasn't accusing, just stating plain facts. Everyone in the team put their reviews in the box on the manager's desk. The manager was supposed to look through them and use it to tackle issues or any areas of discord in the team discreetly. In spite of the fact that these reviews were supposed to be anonymous and only for the eyes of the manager, Mindy somehow found out what was on them, and she was furious. She accused us of ganging up on her and bullying her, and you guessed it, she tattled to the manager. He called an emergency team meeting to address it. He brushed off our concerns about how Mindy had read them at all. These were supposed to be anonymous and private. I need you to rewrite them all, he said. We all looked at each other. One of my colleagues, who I'll call Tom, piped up. We did exactly as you asked. Our reports were truthful and constructive, Tom said. No, you can't write this. You need to write them again. And this time, stick to facts. Our manager snapped, and that was that. Mindy grinned smugly at us as we left. Tom stepped in and suggested we go out together and figure this out. There was no way we were going to lie and say Mindy was a great employee, like our manager obviously wanted us to, but we had to do what he said. Tom had been at the company for decades and always stood by his colleagues. He was a genuinely fantastic guy and we all loved him. He suggested we go out for drinks together to discuss it away from Mindy, so we did. At first, none of us knew what to do. What facts can we give about her that won't get us in trouble? Mindy sits at desk number 666. Mindy has short hair, I said sarcastically. Tom's eyes suddenly lit up. Yes, he said, that's exactly what we'll do. We worked together and came up with a plan. We redid the forms and we all wrote the exact same thing. Mindy has short hair. Mindy sits at desk 666. Mindy works 9 to 5:30. Literally just a laundry list of mundane facts about Mindy, and our forms were identical. We waited until the last moment to post them in the box. Our manager hit the roof, but there was nothing he could do about it. We did what he asked, and there was no time for him to make us do another. So, he just submitted them. The scheme was soon dropped because it created too much work and was replaced instead with a system where colleagues could nominate each other for awards. Guess who never got nominated for any awards? For the record, this took place before the lunch break fiasco, in case you were wondering. Neckbeard tries to buy inferior parts to keep money for the build. Malicious Compliance intervenes. Posted by Anonymous B315. Now, some people believe the customer is always right. This is a problematic belief. The truth is, most of the time, the customer is an entitled jerk. But you're supposed to perform admirably anyway. This gets harder when you're dealing with anyone who thinks they know something they do not. So, a guy comes into my department and I greet him at the carpet. I tended to be Johnny on the spot whenever someone came in. "Welcome to our build your own department. I'm Anonymous. What are we putting together today?" The man scoffs at me and says, "A computer, obviously." All attitude. He was Neckbeard wearing a My Chemical Romance shirt, pants so tight he had a mushroom top and a mismatched shoes. This was obviously on purpose, as both shoes were clean, they just didn't fit his look. I didn't take much time examining him. My dad had always told me I gotta get the measure of a man with a glance and look him in the eye the whole time. He literally used test us on this crap. Turn, look, then tell him what cars we saw in that split second. I was decent enough at it, but not great. I instead would tell myself little lyrics on the fly to remember key details. It's become a life habit. I explained this to point out that I wasn't staring at his look, so I'm pretty sure the snickering hens in the general section who didn't work for us were the source of his ire about being judged about his look. He took my smile as me thinking something was funny. I feigned ignorance, like I didn't hear him, and then when he asked again, I apologized and asked him to speak louder. Told him I was hard of hearing. This relaxed him a bit, thinking I couldn't possibly have heard the hens giving him the business. I did, but I wasn't going to show it. With an attitude, he handed me a list and leaned forward shouting, "I don't want to be sold nothing. Here's what I need. Go get it." I look at the list and it's pretty thorough. Names of items and SKU numbers. I'm like, bet. This looks like a full build. Good money, though a lot of them I identify as cheaper parts. I tell him it'll take me a few minutes and invite him to take a look around in case he sees anything else he might need. He rudely says he'll wait there and he ain't buying crap else, so don't try none of my snake oil salesman crap. I smile and say, "Oh no, but it's so good for the joint and muscles." He didn't think it was funny, so I just walked away and got his stuff. Halfway through grabbing his items, I realized that he only looked at prices and not what each thing did. His build had an AMD processor, but he wanted an Intel board. The case he wanted was slim, and the video card he wanted would not fit. He needed lower profile, though the Intel board had integrated graphics, so I was sure why he picked the card. Also, the power supply he wanted was of lower quality and wattage than the one that came with the case. All in all, I was compelled to ask what the heck he was trying to build. I gathered everything quickly and brought it up, going over each piece with him and getting his approval. I then asked him if all of this was for the same build, which he replied was something smart like, "Wow, how observant of you," or something like that. I smiled and tried to inform him that some of these parts would not work together, but he simply cut me off. "Listen, I don't need you to try to upsell me. I've been building computers for a while. I know what I'm doing." He did not, and I wanted to question that validity of his claim. I asked him then if he would like to hear about our return policy, just in case. He got belligerent, telling me he knows what he's doing and how dare I treat him like he's stupid just because of the way he looks. Granted, he did look stupid, but I think his ire was more for the cute girls giving him crap and insecurity versus anything I said. "Alrighty, you're not interested in our return policy or our extended warranty policy, right?" I confirmed. We're supposed to ask about the warranties with everyone, but I figured he was not going to take kindly to that, so all I wanted to do was cover my bases. "Warranties are for suckers. Do I look like a sucker?" he snapped. Yes, he did, but I wasn't going to say that. I just smiled at him and asked if I could double check his list to see if I got everything. I whipped out my phone and took a picture of everything along with the list. I knew most of this was coming back. And I let him go about his day. I didn't even sticker it. I knew what was coming. 2 days later, Neckbeard shows back up, muffin top, 2 different pairs of shoes, and an anime shirt that made Goku look like he has a fisheye head. He looked embarrassed and angry. He had with him someone who I at first thought was his girlfriend, a little Latino woman who I was certain was either blind or a gold digger, but turned out to be his sister. Absolutely no resemblance. She was friendly and told me she was trying to build a gaming computer to play Crysis. I was a little incredulous, young, and to be honest, at that time, didn't think that girls played games like that. So I turned to him and said, "Crysis," and he shrugged. Little lady stepped up and reiterated herself with a bit of friendly mocking because she knew what I was thinking. Apparently, she got crap for being a gamer girl. I just shrugged and told the truth. There was no way in heck that previous build was going to play Crysis very well. The brother, whom I'm going to call Neckbeard from here on out, had an attitude. He said yeah and handed me another list. This one's similar to before. He made no explanation for his previous mistake and just told me to get the new items along with the same line about not upselling him. I looked at the list and I knew right away that the build was not going to play that game very well. I mean, I could get him there with a $1,500 build, barely, but this was something like $900 and that video card, I don't even remember what it was not going to cut it. I told him so and that maybe he should look at the game specs online, which would help him make a better decision. He told me he had done his homework and just to get what he said. I looked at his sister, pleading, and told her that I could come up with a system that was both affordable and would run the game decently. He interjected and got mad, threatening to get another salesperson, and said okay, but I knew his butt would be back again. As I'm getting his stuff, I hear him away from his sister on the phone. He's telling someone that he wants to finish this up and get the build done. Apparently his parents had allocated some money for this, and he was trying to get a cheap system so he could keep the rest of the money. A real D-bag move, but not my problem. I gathered what he asked for and sent him on his way, but didn't tag the stuff either. He was either coming back or could go to the pool. I saw Neckbeard 2 days later with his little sister in tow, and his parents. He was not dressed like a disaster that day. His parents did all the talking. There was no list. They told me that they trusted their son to get this done, because he was good with computers, but the game wasn't working properly, and they were trying to get everything together for their daughter's birthday, which had apparently passed after the first time I met Neckbeard. The parents then told me they only had $3,000 to spend on this computer. They looked up the average price of high-end gaming rigs and wanted to buy an Alienware, but they were convinced to buy their son to build it themselves, possibly so he can control what they spent. $3,000. This man was trying to snake his parents out of like $2,000 with these crappy builds. They told me to put together something that would work, and I smiled at Neckbeard and said, "What's a $3,000 limit?" They confirmed, and I grinned. Cue malicious compliance. I tell them I can definitely do that and ask if they want to come with me and discuss each part piece by piece and why I think they need it for their game. I go with them and I build a $3,000 system. Neckbeard is losing his crap. Why do we need this? Why do we need that? But no one will listen to him because of his previous failures. I built a system that I'd be proud to own and got it around $2,700 and then explained the warranty and how they could have us build it and have parts and labor on that warranty. And of course they took it. Neckbeard was PO'd because we went a little over, and I even talked his parents into getting a boss monitor for the game. These I certainly stickered. If Neckbeard hadn't been such a jerk, I'd have built him the system that could play the game, and he would have been able to go about his fiendish plan and keep his parents' change. Instead, he got nothing, and his sister got a build that she loved, and a case that she apparently had always wanted, a white Antec with purple fans. Moral of the story, don't be a jerk to your salesman. Tell them what you want and need, and they'll accommodate most times, or at the very least, know what the heck you're doing. If he'd known computers like he'd claimed, this wouldn't have been an issue. Either way, I'm glad things didn't work out for him, and this time, there were no returns. This guy was trying to make some money and rip off his family, so when you can do your job and put him in his place, show that your knowledge prevails and his fails, you have truly done the malicious compliance. Well done, OP. You made me erase the computer by LDoctor52. I worked for a company for 3 years and it was awful, unethical thieves, so getting crap canned was the best thing to happen. I was going to move on anyway. I'm told I'm being let go, pandemic, sales, blah blah. Before I leave, I have to go to HR for an exit interview. While in there, I have to take out my tablet and wipe it. Set it back to factory settings, per HR. I confirmed they wanted this. Confirmed. Okay, done. Today, 6 months after being canned, I get a call from the new sales manager asking me what happened, where the files went. It was back to factory settings. They can't recover important documents and on and on. I'm laughing as he's going on and on. I said, "Jim, I erased everything. I erased everything like you asked and HR directed me to do." Jim chimes in. "They did make you reset it, didn't they?" I confirm. "We can't get access to any of the files. There's something wrong with our backup. The rep that's taking your place has no info." Yeah. As Jerry Seinfeld would say, that's a shame. As an edit, I like Jim and was disappointed that I couldn't work with him. We shoot the breeze for a bit and he confirms it's really bad at the former company. The Titanic has hit the iceberg. I mean, you just followed directions. They said delete, you deleted it. They said factory settings, you did factory, you confirmed. That's what was it. I mean, there's nothing else to say, but you did what you're supposed to do and complied. Grounded because of my grades? No problem. Posted by Naramix. When I was in the 8th grade, my dad got my midterm report that said I had an F in math class. Dad told me I was grounded until the end of the month. So, no phone, no TV, no computer? That's right. Until the end of the month? Exactly. Okay. The next day, my dad found me on the computer playing games. What the heck are you doing? Didn't I say you were grounded? I smiled and nodded. Yeah, until the end of the month. End of the month was yesterday. Today's the 1st. Dad called me smart and threatened to ground me longer. In the end, I spent about a week reading books and listening to music, and my punishment was forgotten about. I mean, you followed the rules, but that's still pretty risky to go about that way because the parent will take it further just like he did. Congratulations, you made it to the very end of the compilation. I honestly appreciate your support in watching this far, so be sure to comment the secret phrase below. I comply with malice. Keep it going here with the Pro Revenge compilation or another video next. I'm Austin, thank you for watching.